Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of our higher education podcast on disability and everything and anything that intersects with it. Today, we'll be talking about the transition to employment and employment in general for those of us that struggle with that and are just leaving university, particularly with the pandemic and COVID impacting employability. Now is the perfect time for you to watch this and read the accompanying article. Today, I am joined by two wonderful individuals. We've got Jane. Jane, please do introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi Piers, great to be here. Yes, I'm Jane Hatton and I'm a disabled entrepreneur, and I founded Evenbreak 10 years ago, which is a social enterprise run by and for disabled people. We have a job board, specialist job board for disabled candidates looking for work and for those employers who are enlightened enough to see us as a valuable source of talent to find us. And we also help organisations become more accessible and inclusive. And more recently, we've started a career hive, which is a support service for disabled people looking for new or better work. And as I say, all delivered by people with lived experience of disability. So I'm very pleased to be here today.
There'll be links in the description below linking to the work that you've just mentioned. And I know looking for jobs is not always easy, so I'm sure that career hive and all of that support that you do will be greatly appreciated by our audience, as well as what you're speaking about today.
And it's all free, so they're very welcome to come to us.
Music to everyone's ears, I think. We're joined, if you can't tell from the background, similar background to mine, by another one of our amazing diversity and ability individuals, Adam. For those that don't know, Diversity and Ability is a disabled-led social enterprise, similar to Evenbreak, but I'll let Adam introduce himself further more than that. Adam, take it away.
Thank you, Piers. Again, great to be here. I'm Adam Hyland. I'm one of the co-founding directors of D&A. I'm the director of accessibility and inclusion. So I get to get excited about inclusion every day and work with some amazing, talented people in D&A to help organisations and education providers to become more inclusive.
So the very first topic that we're talking about today is almost always the topic on every disabled person's mind when looking at the workplace. It's about disclosure, with the recent findings from the Disabled Students Commission finding that only 7.9% of disabled students receive disability-specific careers advice. It can often be something that you won't get until you've already graduated and are looking for work. We'll go to Jane first. In terms of your experiences and the work that you've been doing, what advice and tips and tricks do you have available how to navigate that post-graduation employment disability relationship?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, as you say, it's something that's at the forefront of everybody's mind when you're disabled and you're going for a job. Do I tell them? Don't I tell them? I'm not keen on the word disclosure, if I'm honest, or declaration, because it sounds a bit like it's a dirty secret, and it isn't. And there isn't a black and white answer. You know, it would be lovely to say everybody should always mention their impairment right at the very beginning, or nobody should. I think it depends on so many things. So it depends, for me, I would say, talk about disability when it suits you to do so as a student, as a candidate. And that might be if you're applying to an organisation that you know is very open to disabled candidates, an organisation that has diversity high on its agenda, then it's probably in your interests to talk about it because they're going to be pleased that they're attracting diverse candidates. If it's an organisation you're not too sure of, then it might be better for them to see and learn about your skills first before you start talking about adjustments. But whenever and if, you know, any candidate talks about their own access needs or whatever they might need, for me, it's about how you talk about it. And I know that many of our candidates will spend, the first half hour of an interview telling the employer exactly why they shouldn't employ them. I'm going to need this, I'm going to need that, I'm going to need something else. And from an employer's perspective, it's, oh God, this is just going to be too much, too problematic, too much to cope with. Whereas actually what we know is that disabled candidates are premium candidates, that we actually bring more with us to employers. So for me, it's about saying to a candidate, make sure that the employer knows that if they employ you, they're not just getting someone with the same diverse range of talent and work experience and qualifications as everybody else, but actually so much more as well. I mean, I think, if we look at the last couple of years, having got through a university during COVID with a disability is a humongous achievement. I mean, it's difficult for non-disabled students who've had to be doing things differently, but when you have to factor in, discrimination, lack of access to, whatever you might need, it's a huge achievement. And I think that actually as a student, as a graduate, you need to be shouting that from the hilltops. So it's not just, here I am, I'm a graduate, I've got this degree, I've got these skills, I've written this dissertation, whatever it might be. It's also about, oh, and by the way, I'm dyslexic, which means that I've got different ways of thinking about things and I've come up with solutions that nobody else has. Or, oh, and by the way, I'm autistic, or by the way, whatever it is, and actually couching the disability as the positive that it really can be to an employer. It might be a bit of a nuisance to us as disabled people sometimes, but I think the fact that we spend our entire lives, when you think of the social model, navigating around barriers that other people don't, that means that we have to develop creative thinking, project management, problem solving, all of those things that are going to be really valuable to employers. So what I would say is, if you do make the decision to talk about your disability, whenever that suits you to do so, make sure that you do it in a really positive way, and don't sort of go in, oh, please give me a chance because I'm a disabled graduate and I know that I'm less likely to get jobs than anyone else. Go in with the attitude of, you'd be really lucky to have me because I bring so much with me. That's my view.
That's brilliant. I wholeheartedly agree. And when I graduated, I definitely used to introduce myself as the best problem solver that I'll ever interview today, just because as a wheelchair user, everything requires planning, everything requires problem solving, and it is that thing of, at university, you're always told, oh, you're doing extracurriculars, you got to do this, you got to do that, just to get it on your CV. As a disabled student, your extracurriculars can sometimes include navigating everything you're encountering.
Just getting through the day, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And we're always remiss in including that in, as you say, in celebrating who we are and celebrating the tips and skills that we've developed.
Yeah, and I think now, sorry to interrupt, that since the world of work as we know is changing, since the pandemic. I mean, it's changing before, but it's accelerated, I think, that change. And what employers are looking for now, apart from the fact they have massive skill shortages, and my argument would be, where are the skill shortages? You're just not looking in the right place for those skills. What employers really need now in the new world of work are employees who are flexible, adaptable, innovative, are used to doing things in different ways, as you say, problem solvers, all of those things. So actually, if we were premium candidates pre-COVID, how much more so now? If you want employees who are used to working from home, or used to doing things in different ways, or finding different ways of doing things, that's the kind of candidate that an employer should be crying out for right now.
I think, again, the language and the narrative around sharing your differences in your diversity is problematic, and Jane has already got that first define, and it's not a dirty secret, it's part of you as a human being, and human beings are genuinely amazing and fantastic, and I think that is probably a challenge to some people in terms of language. And then I genuinely tend to quote, and it is a little bit bizarre, as Jane is right there with that, but I know Jane even like did some research into barriers to employment, and the biggest most common barrier was not knowing whether that employer was going to value your diversity and take your active needs seriously. I think the reason I'm mentioning that in this question is I think that it's not a one size fits all answer to the question about do you share the diversity or not. I think certainly one thing that D&A are working on and seeing more is organisations starting to say we want diverse candidates, we want diversity and we welcome it and we value it. And I think, as Jen said, it's about gauging whether you as an individual feel safe with that employer to do so. I genuinely hope we're seeing a shift now where more and more employers are genuinely and authentically wanting diversity in their workforce. So I would definitely advocate for sharing our diversity when it's appropriate. But also I think it's about it not being about the single disability. It's about it being what you need to reach your potential. At the end of the day, employers want successful teams that are reaching their potential and staying and creating a sense of belonging. So for me, it's not always about saying I'm dyslexic or I'm worthy. It's about saying I'm the right candidate for the job, as we've already heard from Jane and you this. But in order to do that, I will need access to the building, but I will be accompanied by my assistant, or I will need some assistive technology in schools. And I think it's that, again, that narrative of it being an asset instead of compounding what is an outdated narrative around it being a deficit.
Couldn't agree more there, Adam. And if you were to go back maybe about just over half a decade or so, I would have been one of those people that would be speaking about my disability as a deficit in interviews, and I even did in some of them back then. And it took me a while. It took me engaging with other disabled people, disabled organisations, and realising actually I need to shift that narrative. I need to go and look at what's great about it. And then I realised I'm really great at conference planning. I'm really great at working out exactly how many people are actually going to comfortably fit in this building, not how many people can we fit, because that number that a conference tells you of 300 is as everyone's packed in there like sardines, and that's not what you want.
Having said that, I'm not suggesting for a minute that it's an easy shift, an easy conversation to have, because the reality can be quite different when employers aren't in that mindset yet. So I'm not undermining the challenges that are out there. I'm just hopefully highlighting the shift I think is coming and how we as a community can help speed up that narrative.
Definitely. And I think we've all been conditioned, haven't we, whether we're disabled or not, by the deficit medical model. There's something wrong with disabled people and they need fixing. Whereas, hopefully, we're promoting the social model left, right, and centre. There's nothing wrong with disabled people. It's the fact that there are barriers that can be removed that are in our way. But of course, a lot of the employers haven't got there yet. They're still thinking in the medical model, deficit model, oh, this is going to be expensive or problematic. And sometimes, sadly, it's up to the candidate to educate them. It shouldn't be that way around, but, that's the real world that we're living in.
I do agree in summary that, yeah, disclosure is, it makes it sound like a dirty secret. It's always seen as this, well, you've got to disclose all the bad things that you could be associated with. And it really isn't. I like your term, Adam, there of, sharing your diversity. And it is a privilege to employers that if you feel comfortable to share. And I do like that idea of it being, we were the premium candidates before the pandemic. Now we are, best in slot, as it were. We are the best candidates. We're the most flexible, and who have been doing, that hybrid home working, office working for a long time, just because that's what has worked for us. Talking about that practical, realistic world that we unfortunately do have to enter every now and again. As you mentioned, Jane, the practical aspect is we sometimes do have to educate employers, and sometimes support is available, but it's kind of hidden. And sometimes that comes in the form of, as I've heard it called, the Department for Work and Pensions best kept secret, which is access to work. For those listening that don't know what access to work is, which might be quite a few of you, access to work is a grant support from the government that supports you in accessing work-related activities, in supporting you with lots and lots of different aspects. There'll be a full breakdown and things on our website for a full in-depth guide as to what access to work is, as I really don't have time to explain every aspect of it. But it's effectively a free thing that you can apply for as a disabled person and get support to help you with interviews, even to employment and your day-to-day itself. Knowing about that and the issue of that, it's such a hard-kept secret. What are sort of like the first steps in sort of navigating that process of access to work? And are there any particular pitfalls that people should be aware of when sort of going for that support, whether it's employer related, access to work related? I'll start with you, Adam, this time.
I think we need to be aware that it's a long process. So I would really encourage people to apply early. You can apply online now, which you'd think you could do it for years. It's a relatively new thing. I think, but applying early is really key, because it can take a while, especially because of the impact of the pandemic and different ways of working and more needs and more applications. But I think on top of that, and I guess it's related to the previous question, is if we can be more knowledgeable about it ourselves when we are talking to our managers, our employers, or HR teams, because we're saying that I know that access to work exists. I know that it can help support me in the workplace, treat my potential. And I think although it shouldn't be on us as a community to know about it in detail, I do think employers don't know about it enough. So if we can really start to talk more about it and have an understanding of how it can support us in the workplace, I think that will help employers feel more confident about supporting us or supporting you as an individual. So for me, it's about applying early and really taking it to your employer because unfortunately there's just a good chance they're not going to know anything about it. Which again, it's sad, but it's the reality. But I do think employers will want to know about it and want to support you in applying.
Yeah, and knowledge is power, isn't it? I think, and you know, and I understand that some employers will think, you know, well, if I employ this person, we're going to need assistive technology. I have no idea how much that costs or where to get it from or what it means. And it can be something that, you know, employers can be quite worried about. You know, I don't know how this person will get to work, or I don't know how we'd support their mental health, or whatever it might be. And I think if the candidate can say to the employer, you know, look, I need JAWS software, but it's okay because Access to Work will provide it, or I need support in traveling to and from work, but that's okay because Access to Work will provide it. It just removes that barrier that the employer might be perceiving that doesn't actually exist. So I think, yeah, the more that as candidates, as disabled candidates, we know about Access to Work and what it offers, you know, and as Piers said, it's quite broad ranging. It's not just assistive technology. It might be assistance. You know, I have a driver, for example, that Access to Work pays for because it's difficult for me to drive long distances. You know, we use Access to Work a lot at Evenbreak because all of our team are disabled in different ways. And so, you know, some have big monitors, some have coping strategy, coaching, you know, I mean, it really is quite wide ranging. And I think the more we know that we can have, it makes us realize, actually, I could do that job with that support. Because sometimes I think, well, I could never do that job because of X, Y, or Z. But actually, there may well be things that will help us to do something that we weren't sure about, whether it's a support worker or you know, a BSL interpreter or whatever it might be, or it might be mental health support. So, for example, Access to Work can provide training for the manager in how to support a candidate, an employee with mental health issues, all those kinds of things. Or if they're doing a return to work strategy, how that works when someone's had long-term sick leave because of a disability issue. So I would suggest to anybody listening that if you're not familiar with Access to Work, get as familiar with it as you possibly can. I'm sure D&A will give you lots of links and lots of support on how to apply and what kinds of things to talk about. But knowledge is power. And if you can go to an employer and say, I do have access needs, but you don't have to worry about that because Access to Work will sort all that out. Employers don't have to be the experts in access needs. They don't have to be the expert in workplace adjustments because the help is out there for them, and then they can relax about that and stop worrying about it. And it makes you then a candidate on equal terms with somebody else, except, as we said, you're also a premium candidate. So what's not to love?
Indeed.
I don't think I could have asked for a better answer from either of you two there. Taken right from my heart, I think, which is, if you don't know about Access to Work, even if you aren't disabled yourself, if you work in a workplace, you should know about Access to Work, particularly because long COVID is a thing. And your employees who acquire long COVID, who previously didn't have any interaction with the disabled world, will not know anything about Access to Work. And it might actually be up to you to mention it to them, or even just share this video with them. It might be a bit of a handy thing, as they'll be encountering all of those things for the first time. Unfortunately, this is pretty much all we have time for today. So I'll just ask you guys for one little tip or a bit of advice that you would give to anyone listening that they can do after watching this / listening, or engaging with a tomorrow or the day after, something practical they can do directly after listening. But it's been a pleasure to have you, and I'll go over to you, Jane, first. What's your one bit of advice? Be greedy?
Can I have two? And
yes, yeah, of course.
So the first one is write down, in however you use communication, capture all of the reasons why you're a premium candidate. So what is it that you have learnt through having to navigate around barriers that makes you a better candidate than other people? So just absolutely convince yourself, you know, find the evidence that you are a premium candidate because you are. And then the second thing I would say is use the support that's out there. So go to D&A, they have lots of support. We have a career hive. You're very welcome to come and have support from us as well. So you're not on your own. The support is out there, even if your university isn't perhaps providing it as much as you might hope, but there's lots of other organisations. Sorry, I got two.
Brilliant. I can't disagree with either of them. Adam?
I think James summed it up perfectly. I think, knowledge is power. If you need to know more, want to find out more, get in touch with D&A or Evenbreak. I'm sure we'll be happy to help. And I know Jane and the team at Evenbreak have got a host of employees who actually recognise the fact that there's women candidates right there, and to do have a look at Evenbreak, and obviously D&A support people in the workplace, day in, day out, so always happy to have a conversation and make sure that we're really shifting that narrative that the society has quite wrongly been using for too many years now. Difference is what we need in society. Difference is what makes the world tick. So be confident and be you.
Brilliant. Couple of points from both of you there. Thank you so much for joining me today. I will say, as my bit of advice to everyone, if you receive DSA, please apply for access to work. It's so much, pretty much a lot of the support you got from DSA can be put in the workplace, and we have such a low uptake from DSA to access to work that it's criminal almost as to how low the two disparities are. So if you receive DSA and you're listening to this, apply for access to work. If you know someone that receives DSA, tell them to apply for access to work. It's a great little support service, and we're here to support you as well. But thank you so much for joining me today. It's been an absolute pleasure and wonderful to have such brilliant answers from the both of you. There's been quite a few things mentioned today about the Careers Hub and our guides that we have on our website. We'll put those all in the description below, so you won't have to worry about trying to find them online, which can be quite difficult. But as a massive thank you from me to the wonderful guests that we've had and to everyone that's been listening, it's been an absolute pleasure. And you can catch us next time at the same place. So thank you so much, and enjoy your week.